I would like to tell you a little bit about the writing of these novels. Obviously, in 10 or 15 minutes, I don't want to take too much of your time. In 10 or 15 minutes, I can't go into all of it. I would keep you here for days and days if I tried to go into all the details, but just a few details to give you some idea of specifically of what I'm talking about. Among other problems with Dostoyevsky, well, in the first place, he was commissioned to, he got himself into terrible debts, terrible financial debts. It was way, way over his head. And so a publisher came along, a publisher named Stilovsky, and said, look, I'll clear up all your debts, and I'll give you enough money to live on for 2 years, but you have to sign a contract. I want a povest, that is a novella from you, of a specified length. In those days, it was notebooks, a certain number of notebooks that were handwritten, which you will agree to give me exactly 24 months after you sign this contract. And if you give me that novella, everything will be fine. But if you give it to me 1 day later, in this contract, then the terms of this contract, I will get all the rights to everything you've ever published and all the rights to everything you ever will publish. And Dostoyevsky signed that contract. Obviously, he needed a lot of money. Well, what do you think happened? Do you think he sat down and month by month? 23 months went by, and not a word was written. Can you imagine the desperation? And then he was told, you know, there was a French writer named Stendhal, by the way, very influential in Russian literature. Tolstoy said if Stendhal hadn't written The Charterhouse of Parma, he never could have written War and Peace the way he did. That's high praise. Stendhal had written perhaps his greatest novel, The Charterhouse of Parma, by dictation. He had dictated it at the rate of something like 24 pages a day. Can you imagine that? It's a great novel. They said to Dostoevsky, why don't you try it? What did he have to lose? Well, there was a school of dictation that is where people, the young women were learning to be stenographers, writing shorthand. This was something new in Russia in those days. They got one of the most gifted students. She was actually a woman of Swedish descent. Anna Grigorievna Snitkina was her name. And she came to Dostoevsky, and he, what am I going to do with a young woman? My God, she's probably some kind of a radical, some kind of a feminist. For a whole day this went on, but finally the dam broke, and he started to dictate, and exactly on the day it was finished. He took it, they took it to Stilovsky. Well, Stilovsky was no fool. He knew what was going on, so what he did was to close the office that day, so he couldn't deliver it. And what they did was take it, in those days, the equivalent of a notary public's office. It was the police station, and it was notarized. It had been delivered on the proper day. There was a lawsuit which Dostoevsky won. Well, what does a Russian do at this point? You give a banquet. And believe me, that hasn't changed one bit since those days. You give a banquet, and everybody, all the friends come, and there's plenty of vodka. And of course, the young stenographer was invited. And Dostoevsky said to her, he said, look, I need your advice. Well, she said, certainly, Fyodor Mikhailovich, whatever I could give, I can't imagine what you'd want from me. He said, well, I'm trying to write a novel, and there's this man who's an awful character. He's been to prison, his temperament is terrible, he antagonizes people, and he's fallen in love with a woman who's much younger than he is. Do you think it would be realistic if I were to write a proposal? She said, I accept your proposal. And I'm not kidding, this happened. And she became his second wife, Anna Grigorievna Snitkina.